Dear Gratitude Anthology is out.
With over 50 different perspectives and stories on gratitude, this book captures what most books don't. The secret sauce is in the number of voices and stories where you'll be sure to find a personal connection to so many as I did. A really excellent book, David Freeman. Found exclusively on Amazon.com.
Hi, I'm Chris, and welcome to Gratitude Space Radio. I've got my co-host today, my good friend, one of my mentors, and the author of the Someday Solution here with me. Hey, Bob Kuntz, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, it's good to be here again. Awesome. Thank you, my friend. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And, before we get started, you are the author of the Someday Solution. So tell people real briefly about your book.
Very simply, it's just a book about what's possible when we step into the moment, when we realize that someday doesn't exist, that someday is a figment of our imagination. And literally, you can go from unsure to unstoppable one day at a time, because that's how everything is done. So yeah, it's just a methodology for, a way to show up in the world, to make a commitment to whoever it is that you want to be, whatever it is that you want to do, whatever you want to become.
That's beautiful. Okay, well, you're the one that introduced me to our guest, so I would like you to say a few words, and we will bring Bree in.
Yeah, so Bree has a mission, and that mission is one day at a time, literally day by day, changing the. I'm trying to think the best way to really describe this. Here's a great thing. So we're all about gratitude here, right? So Bree is crowdsourcing gratitude. Bree is crowdsourcing the collective consciousness of everyone who's a part of the Miracle Morning to make this planet a better place. And my why are my grandkids. And Bree has a big why about kids as well. And she's got the Miracle Morning Art of Affirmations color book. And that's what introduced me to Bree through our very dear friend, Michael O'Brien from the Pause, Breathe, Reflect movement. And Bree is just an incredible human being. She is a conductor, just like you are. You conduct gratitude. She conducts the Miracle Morning on Clubhouse, and she does it with precision. She is the orchestra conductor, and she brings all of the people together so they can share their stories, share the affirmations, share in the savers, which I'll let her tell you all about. She is one amazing human being, and she is changing the planet one day at a time.
Beautiful. And welcome, Bree.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello. Hi, guys. So nice to see you.
Welcome. Thank you so much for making this happen today. I really appreciate it, Bree.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks so much for how you spread gratitude all over the internet.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And thank you for being a part of that right now. So it's beautiful. Well, would you like to, I always like to start these off with kind of like, how do we, obviously this is a grateful moment because the three of us are hanging out. We're going to talk some gratitude. We're going to talk some affirmations. But I love to step back and go and think the modality or the people that allowed these moments to happen. So, for example, I'll pass the ball off to you, Bree. How did you meet Bobby? What were the mechanics of that meeting?
How did I meet Bobby? Oh, so fun. I met Bobby in the Miracle Morning room on Clubhouse, which I host every single day at 7 a.m. Central. And Bobby is friends with Michael O'Brien, who's the founder of the Pause, Breathe, Reflect movement. And months ago, Michael joined our room, and he was really moved by the work that we're doing at the Miracle Morning movement. And he said, you know what? My work is centered around elevating the consciousness of humanity as well. And I'd really like to bring what you pretend is a coloring book. I actually have what I pretend is a positive affirmations coloring book, but really it's a positive psychology workbook that teaches families how to create structured morning routines and teaches you how to shift your own subconscious programming. And he said, I get it. I see what's happening here. And I'd really like to bring this coloring book to the Peloton that I have of people in my tribe that I connect with every day. And I'd love to have you on my podcast. And so I was on the Kintsugi podcast. I connected with Michael, and then he shared my coloring book with Bobby. And then Bobby joined our Clubhouse room, and he became the PTR king of the Clubhouse room. He has this beautiful way of expressing gratitude. I know, I love it. It's so good. I am curious. he has this beautiful way of
So
expressing
much fun.
gratitude to everybody who shares. And he does that through, he literally just takes the essence of what they're saying and he changes his profile picture in a way that in real time people feel seen, heard, validated, and like they matter. So sometimes he puts up an affirmation from my coloring book. Sometimes it's I believe in you. Sometimes it's flowers. Sometimes it's a heart rippling out. Sometimes it's a lighthouse. Sometimes it's, whatever it is that people really need in that moment. And Bobby has this true essence of being able to identify what that is and creatively expressing that without even using words. And so he is speaking volumes in the room each and every day with his contributions. And that is how I know Bobby.
Wow.
That's beautiful. I love the inverse of that is the reason I know Michael O'Brien is because Bobby introduced me saying, you should interview Michael for your website. So we've got these cross-training of pre-gratitude for the moments and the people we're meeting here. So I love that. Bobby, so speak on your end about all that too.
It's really simple. Michael is a great encourager, and so is Bree. Bree literally breathes courage into people every single day. And Michael encourages people to become the very best version of themselves every single day. And as he introduced this to the group, now listen, you got to realize too, Michael kind of took a risk with this group because typically the monthly book that we get from him, now he's a little bit edgy as it relates to, the corporate coaching world, but, this was a real stretch. And he had honestly some angst about sharing this book with the group, but it was so well received. And then these messages started coming to me. You should come check out Clubhouse. You need to come check out the Miracle Morning Room. There's something magical happening here. He said, I think you could be a really great part of that. I think it would be really good for you. What I didn't know was waiting for me was Bree with open arms to invite me to become a part of everything that this room is all about. And literally in the room, wisdom is being crowdsourced every day and then shared back out into the planet to make this world just a little bit better. And the savers are magical. The things that have happened for me since making this shift, Michael's word, shift, he's all about shift, since making this shift to commit to showing up for myself so that I could fill my cup first, and then I would have abundance to share with others. A lot of us don't think about taking the time to fill our own cup first. It's kind of like putting the oxygen mask on first on the plane. You have to put your oxygen mask on first so that you can then help other people. So Bree's done all of the hard work for years, like 13 years. However, it wasn't until the Miracle Morning Clubhouse room that she unmuted herself and brought her voice into the room. And ever since she's done so, her leadership has allowed for people to show up and have the magic of the room poured into them so that they could experience the kind of day that they want to experience. This book is now in schools across the country because of the magic of what happens with the crowdsourcing that takes place in this room. We can do together what none of us could ever achieve alone. And that's kind of the essence of the room. And the room is lifting people up every day. And then they're going out into their communities and they're lifting their communities up. And together, day by day, one day at a time, literally radical shifts in literally the fabric of the universe are happening. There are schools now. Bree, you need to tell this story. You need to tell the story of what's happening in the schools because of the support of the community for this book.
Oh,
Please.
You're so cute. The Clubhouse room is like nothing. It's like nothing I've ever seen. We have a Facebook community of over 300,000 people. We have live events that we've done through the years. And the truth is the Clubhouse community in real time has the opportunity to make somebody's dream a reality. And so a couple of maybe 6-7 weeks ago, a principal hopped up on stage and said, that they wanted to bring the Miracle Morning to their school. And that during the pandemic, the Miracle Morning had been like a really nice safety blanket for them. They'd been able to find these practices incredibly helpful. They'd shared it with other principals. They'd been able to share it with some of their staff. However, the specific principal, Jamila, who hopped up on stage, her community was incredibly hard hit during the pandemic. Many, many people passed away. Many, many people were very, very ill. And as a result, she was just given the news that her school was going to go back in person. And they'd been like a virtual school ever since March of 2020. And so she said that the thing that had gotten her through the pandemic as a principal was the Miracle Morning. And so she wanted to be able to provide that for the rest of her staff and the rest of her students and the rest of her school community, as in the PTO, as in the families of the students, families, siblings, etc. And she hopped up on stage and said, I'd like to be able to bring the Miracle Morning, which made a big impact in my life, to the rest of my community. And then another principal hopped up on stage. And then another principal hopped up on stage. And in that first moment, a woman named Jody said, I want to chime in here, and I'd like to send you $10. And then somebody else said that, and somebody else said that, and somebody else said that. And what snowballed is that by the end of the room, we were able to raise enough money that Hal and I matched. And when we went back to the principals and said, what are your actual needs? We just took note. And then we said, yeah, sure, we'll send you all of that. It wasn't like, oh, we can only afford to, there was none of that. And it was the generosity of the room. And then Hal and I being so touched by the generosity of the room that we said, whatever it is that needs to happen in order for us to serve these principals in whatever way that they are looking for, we're going to do. And so we were able to send the Miracle Morning to every single staff member at all 3 of these schools, the Miracle Morning for parents and families to all of the PTO members, the Miracle Morning for teachers as a resource to all of the staff, and then the Miracle Morning Art of Affirmations to every single classroom and specialist. And what that did is it provided the foundation for these teachers to understand how they can bring gratitude and affirmations into the classroom. And what transpired was, I actually went to visit 2 of the 3 schools that we're piloting this in. And one of them has affirmations outside of every classroom, like where it says classroom 107. And then it says, I'm ready and committed to make this my best year ever. You go to the next one. I believe in my potential, not in my past. I am curious. I am creating the life of my dreams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I noticed is that when we create an environment where people are looking to affirm what's working, when we create an environment when people are looking to play to their strengths, when we create an environment where people are looking to cheer you on as you're vulnerable, what happens is that you're able to learn and grow in a much more psychologically safe way. And when you opt in to sharing something vulnerable and you're affirmed, especially if you're 5 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old, and the otherwise what might be happening is somebody bullying you or somebody not receiving you well or somebody ignoring you. And when you're affirmed and somebody says, yeah, you can do that. I believe in your potential, not in your past. What are the affirmations that you're going to say to yourself in order for you to make that possible? It creates a world of possibilities that weren't otherwise there. And so we are now, I'd call that the pilot program. And now one of the principals actually brought this work to her superintendent. And she said, this is what's happening in my school. And this is what this organization and this community did for me. And that superintendent said, I want to bring this to all 35 of our schools in September. And then she brought it to a nonprofit, the official OSG, the official Off School Grounds nonprofit. So, we want to bring this to 121 schools that are in sub-poverty right now, because we understand that literacy is the gateway to stopping generational poverty. And even though a lot of these kids live in and out of shelters and don't have like a formal home, they are committed to making sure that they're able to start their morning in an intentional way. And so that's what happened in the clubhouse room and what's transpiring. And I don't even know what's going to transpire next. We're creating a certification for schools so that they can actually roll this out in a really succinct manner in the hallways, in the social emotional learning class, in the teacher's lounge, in the classrooms, in the different specialist rooms like the art class and gym class. And think about what would be made possible if you were meditating, if you were stating your vision for your future, if you were affirming how that might be made possible, if you were taking massive action on the things that you wanted for your life as a young person. So we're cultivating the next generation one morning at a time through the Miracle Morning Savers practice and Charms practice. And if for anyone who's listening that doesn't know, the Miracle Morning Savers stands for silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. And the kids version is called Charms, and it stands for creativity, health, affirmations, reading, meditation, and service.
I love the charms for the kids, right? So you take this adult version of the savers and you just massage it just a little bit, and it makes it so palpable for the kids to understand. There's an affirmation, the number one cause of unfulfilled potential is never deciding now matters more than any other time in my life. It does. The reason that we're here right now in this moment is because now matters. We can't wait for the next generation to do this. It takes people stepping up and coming together with a collective vision about what's possible to create change in the world. And what's so beautiful about what's happening in the room, Bree, is that the people are coming together collectively to support this entire vision, this entire mission. And what was today in the room that was so special for everyone? What happened today that was miraculous?
You know, today was a nice little celebration day. It was the 100th day that I've consecutively hosted the Miracle Morning Room on Clubhouse. I'd hosted many before, but they weren't consistent. And then they were. And here we are. And what's transpired is so many individuals being able to come together to create meaningful relationships, to be able to support each other with each other's projects, to be able to create accountability surrounding those projects, and to really create the community that a lot of them have dreamed of for a long time. And so even though the Clubhouse community is just a small extension of the Miracle Morning global family, it's been a beautiful unfolding of creating a sacred space where people are able to really articulate what it is they want to bring into their lives and find support on that, and then actually celebrate in when that's been made possible. And so today was a really big celebration, not just for the room. I mean, like, that was just a byproduct, but the question was really all about, like, what's been made possible by you showing up consistently for yourself, and how have those practices served you in doing so, and what will be made possible in the next 100 days? What are we celebrating now that you didn't think was possible 100 days ago? And what are we going to be celebrating in 100 days based on you consistently showing up for yourself, continuing that consistency? And so we were able to celebrate a lot of different people and the things that they didn't think were possible for themselves, you know, just a few short months ago, and also celebrate like the community at large that we've created, what we've co-created together.
That's beautiful. Bree, I'm curious when you're saying that, is it possible you could share, you don't have to use people's names, but maybe just share a couple of those things you were just talking about, some of these things that have occurred that the people have happened in the last 100 days? Is it possible to share a little bit? Because obviously the room was built there. You put this together. These people I'd love to hear a little more about that.
So I will say that one of the things that was beautiful that's happened that we already touched on is the schools.
Right,
Two principals were on stage today, and they were sharing the massive impact that this has had on their community and the massive impact it's had on them as leaders in and of itself. We also heard from individuals who were sharing so beautifully about unmuting themselves or coming alive or being the bridge to share this work with others. One person in particular said, you know, he's not necessarily inviting people to Clubhouse but he is inviting people to fill up their own cup each and every day. And in their practice, he's now, inspiring people to give themselves 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And the prescription that he's writing for individuals is like, pour into yourself. And pour into yourself consistently and see what's possible. And what I loved about his share in particular is that this guy's incredibly successful, yet he was saying that the success of his patients was amplified based on him having them pour into themselves. And I'm going to kick it to Bobby for a moment, because Bobby might want to share about a few other things that happened in the room today.
One of the things that we're able to do in the room is capture the essence of someone's share almost in real time. And that's a magical thing when that happens, because what happens is in that moment that someone shares something, and they've shared it not from a place of trying to shed or shine light on themselves, but to shine light on others. So let's say, for example, someone in the room has a really vulnerable share, and we had that happen today. Someone was feeling really down. They had some really troubling news. But what they said the Miracle Morning Savers do is they make it possible for them to actually remain positive while they work through their struggle, while they work through their challenge, because they know that the challenge is temporary. They know that every situation is temporary. As a matter of fact, you will hear people express that it's okay to do the hard things, right? Bree, take it from there. Take it from that one, from doing the hard things.
Oh my God. I just love that you mentioned that, because the truth is, not only is it okay to do the hard things, it's encouraged, because it's in doing things that are scary. It's in doing things that we otherwise didn't think was possible that we evolve, and we are able to identify new limitations that we are pushing past each and every day. A lot of people think, oh, well, what if I don't succeed? Well, what if you don't succeed? One of my favorite affirmations is, there is nothing to fear because I cannot fail.
Yep.
Only learn, grow, and become better than I've ever been before.
Yep.
And so if we are evaluating things like, I can do hard things, and what happens if I struggle doing hard things, or I can't do hard things? Well, what can I learn from that? How can I grow? How can I become better than I've ever been before? And when our mindset is looking at things through the lens of, what am I meant to learn here? It changes everything. I had to pull up my notes, because there was one woman who mentioned, I've redefined the CDC.
Oh my gosh, this one was magical.
I was like, you redefine the CDC? She's like, yeah, the real CDC is consistency, dedication, and commitment. And I was like, oh, yes, it is. Great. And someone else said, our consistency compounds together. As a community, we create a collective impact. Yep. And so these nuggets of wisdom that people are sharing that are like inside of their stories and inside of their...
Right there, inside the story, Bree. And the room allows them to come out. The room, Chris, the room is a safe space container for people to show up authentically without fear of judgment. Walt Whitman said, be curious, not judgmental.
Yeah. It's actually a really beautiful space, because we're either crowdsourcing wisdom or we're purposefully connecting, and it's all rooted in gratitude and love and mutual respect, and the understanding that it doesn't really matter how far you've come on your journey, and it doesn't really matter how far I've come on my journey, because if we look at things through the lens of we're lifelong learners, it doesn't matter if you're on day 1 or day 12 or day 74 and I'm on day 10,000. I can still learn something from you, and you can still learn something from me if we're curious. And so there's this mutual love that everybody has for one another, because, there are people in the room that have been Miracle Morning practitioners for 10 plus years. and people in the room that have been practitioners for 3.5 weeks. And they're each literally affirming each other, saying, I can't believe how much I just learned from you, or how your insight is going to help me level up. And that's what it's all about when we understand that it doesn't matter where we are right now. We still have so far we can go on our own journeys, and taking the opportunity to transmute the conversation around competition and transform that into a conversation about reflection. Because if I'm in competition with Bobby, there's a very serious problem. It's a number one red flag. If I'm in collaboration with Bobby, if I'm in community with Bobby, and I'm in reflection with myself, that's where it's all about. If I want to be in competition, I need to be in competition with who I was last week, last month, and last year, as a sounding board for where I'm going to go next week, next month, and next year with my team, as in the people in that room, the people who support me, the people who aren't in that room, the people who understand where we want to go and what effort we're going to put in to get there, and how we can each support each other on that mission. That's what it's all about. And so there's a lot of reflection happening. So we take a page out of Michael's book, Pause, Breathe, and Reflect. And when we do reflect, we're able to cheer ourselves on and say, wow, I can't, like, today was a reflection day. And as much as it was a gratitude day and a cheerleading day, it was a reflection day where people could say, wow, I'm so much further now, 100 days in, than I thought I would be. And they all were able to share it, whether it was in their own journaling practice, whether it was on stage, whether it was with somebody that they encounter later on, whether it was a private DM to someone. They were able to share how far they've come, what was made possible in the last 100 days that they didn't think 100 days ago would have been possible. And so
Shasheen provided a really good example of that today from one of the moderators. But what I'm reminded of with what you say as well is it's not just the ones who are always there or on a real regular basis. It's the other ones who are part of this bigger overall picture or mission about changing the world, with each of the different specific elements that they're really, everyone has Chris, you're all about gratitude. There's a woman that comes, her name's Anna David, and she is all about the recovery movement, right? And when she comes, she pours into the room. So whether it's someone like myself who's in his 31st year of recovery, or if it's someone who's in their first 30 days of recovery, they get the same level of feeling of, oh my gosh, the possibilities for my life are endless, because she pours out where her story originated and how much her life has changed because of the Miracle Morning movement and the savers, and how putting the savers into your life and embracing them and just living them however you do, whether it's 1 minute a day for each of the savers, or if it's more than that, whatever it is, however it fits or however it functions in your life, if you'll just try this, just check it out, just make a commitment to yourself to show up and do the work, your life will change in ways that you could have never possibly imagined. And Anna David's a perfect example of that, of someone in the recovery world who comes into the room and pours into the room.
Chris, I want to know, where did your gratitude enthusiasm come from?
Oh, thanks, Bree. My gratitude journey started in the fall of 2013. So my birthday was coming up, and I was listening to a podcast. Actually, I started listening to podcasts back then, and I was listening to the Adam Carolla show, and he mentioned he had some sort of rant about how he never celebrated his birthday, and that was because of his family life growing up, and that he'd come to look at birthdays almost like appreciation trophies. And his whole thing was, with him, is he's like, if you're going to celebrate your birthday, you should either make it about something else, like an achievement, or make it about someone else. So I picked up on the back end of that, and I just liked it. It was a little nugget that's kind of caught, something, I wrote about in my book. It's like words pass us phrases all day long, right? Sometimes we hear them, sometimes we don't. But that one I heard, right? So that one I heard, and that was, my birthday was coming up. So the morning, I decided that I was going to honor my mother. So I got up really early. It was like 4 a.m. on my birthday. And I essentially wrote her what was a gratitude letter, just telling her that, this day should be more about her than me. She has a memory of it, just all these ideas about how I wanted to, how much I loved her, and that, this coming year that I was going to tell her I loved her more often, I was spend more time with her, and I was going to make her more proud. And I decided when I got finished writing this letter that I was going to put it on our Facebook page so she could find it. So it was very important to me that it was going to be a surprise. I wanted it to be a surprise, and I wanted it to be public. So posted it, went about my morning. And, normally my parents would call me mid-morning to sing happy birthday to me. That was the, tradition. And I didn't receive a phone call. So I waited a little bit longer, and I ended up calling my dad, and I got him on the phone. He wished me happy birthday. And I said, thanks. And I immediately pivoted to, had mom read the letter? And he said she had, and that she couldn't talk to me right now, that she needed time with it. And just to give you a little backstory, Bree, you hear something like that and you would think this is from an estranged son, right? You wouldn't think this is somebody that you talked to the day before. This is somebody that, at a very early age had no problem saying I love you in public or kissing her on the cheek, somebody that I would talk to, daily. But that's the response I got. And it really, even sharing it now, it still kind of blows me away, because you can't build moments like that. And I like to tell people, like, writing a gratitude letter is not magic, but what a gratitude letter can do, what sharing gratitude can do, is sheer magic. It can do things that just aren't possible. So, in the spirit of that, later on we got together in that day, and it just created, because of the circumstance, it just created this moment. It became a moment. It wasn't just a fleeting thing. It wasn't an idea. I didn't, for example, if I would have thought, obviously, oh, in the morning, today's for my mother, and I would have moved on, we wouldn't be talking right now, because that's completely different from intentional action and wanting to connect gratitude where it deserves to be. And, that was December 30th. And I didn't know at the time that, my mom's cancer would come back, and that 4 months to the day later, April 30th, which is in 2 days from now, 7 years ago, that she would pass away in hospice care. Mm-hmm. So anyways, there's a lot more to that story, but the cool thing about, just a couple of add-ons, and because I could speak forever, and this show is not about me, is that, the amazing thing about gratitude and kindness and the things you're talking about, obviously in that room too, is like, it all stacks. It's stacking all the time. These things are stacking. In my situation alone, just that little story, right? Like I wrote a letter, that was one stack. She read the letter, that was another stack. Because I made it public, right? So let's talk about people being in rooms, right? That became its own stack for my dad, for my sister, for other people. If you want to keep going, like, it's stacking right now.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Literally, that letter is still stacking. It's in the book that came out, Dear Gratitude Anthology. That book only exists because I wrote that letter to my mom. And 2 days from now, there's a book called Dear 2020, Letters to a Year That Changed Everything, where 40 other people wrote about perspective and gratitude in last year. Only exists because of that letter. And I like to back up and say that my mom's love was the first stack. So as much as I want to take credit for my writing, it was my mom's love was the original stack, So that's the origins of my gratitude journey.
Chris, thank you so much for sharing such a beautiful and heartfelt story. I'm so sorry for your mom's passing, and I'm so grateful for the legacy you've created to carry on, how she's made a huge impact in your life.
Thank you, Bri. I appreciate that. Thank you. Really do.
It's a beautiful thing for you to not only step into a space of gratitude, but to share that opportunity with others, especially because gratitude is so readily available, and there's always something that we can be grateful for, both big and small. And for you to be the catalyst on inspiring people to be generous with their words and to be intentional with their actions, it's really a beautiful gift.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and that's the next part of my story, which I'll tell really quickly, which really changed my life, which speaks to exactly what you were just saying. Is at my mom's funeral, this letter kept coming back to me, and my dad asked me if I wanted to share something, and I had no desire to get up there and be emotional, but I had my cousin read the letter at my mom's funeral to me, and it had, again, an impacting emotion. And it had such an impacting emotion that the next year I wrote a letter to my dad, because seeing my mom pass away, actually, I read a book recently, and it brings it home. There's always gifts, right? I like to think is everything. My friend Rajesh Shetty said, everything's either a teaching moment or a gift. Speaking back to what you were saying earlier, Bri, like that's how I like to look at everything. And honestly, like one of the gifts that came out of my mom passing away is the relationship with my father is stronger. I look at my father in a different way. I know that, to him, like I know that some couples, they both pass away, right? I know that, but instead he decided to keep living and being basically my superhero, So because of all that, because of him, because of having this connection with the letters, I started a website initiating people to share letters of gratitude. And just a long story short, when I had my first letter come in from Kate, which is also in the book, when I got done reading that letter, I was crying, and I didn't know why I was crying. I asked myself, I had to go through like a emotional checklist to figure out why I was crying, which is coming back to what you were saying. So, I realized I wasn't crying because it was a beautiful letter. I wasn't crying because Kate, I know Kate. It wasn't the words, it wasn't the language, it wasn't any of that. It was the sole reason when it hit me, it changed my entire life, was the only reason that this letter exists, this letter of love, is in the real world. The only reason it exists is because I asked her to write it. Completely changed my life. And that's exactly when you're talking about like these letters in the books, these moments we're sharing gratitude in this space. I just want to create the space to have that moment occur. And it jazzes me more than anything in the freaking world. So, okay.
I can attest to what he just said. I can attest to you that probably the only thing that Chris really cares about, well, I shouldn't say that. Rosio is pretty important in his life too, but the only thing other than Rosio that and his dad, but gratitude is at the beginning of all of that. Chris wakes up grateful that his feet were able to touch the floor. Chris wakes up grateful that he has feet to touch the floor. He wakes up grateful for the coffee that he gets to drink. He wakes up grateful for the water that makes the coffee, for the coffee bean that comes to us from another part of the world, for every breath that he gets to take.
Have you seen that TED Talk?
You talking about the AJ Jacobs one?
Mm-hmm.
Chris got to interview AJ.
I got the blurb in the front of my covers from him in my book. Yeah, he's awesome. I love AJ. That book is fantastic.
Very cool. Well, there's a lot to be said for capturing the ripple effects of the ripple effects of the ripple effects of where the gratitude can extend to when you focus on recognizing that there's so much that went into each moment that we experienced together. Like even for this, there's grateful for the internet, grateful for the email, grateful for the headphones, grateful for the laptop, grateful for Bobby connecting us, grateful for the sacred, and that you could just continue on that gratitude journey as far as you really want to take it. And so I'm grateful for you.
That's gratitude cubed.
And going down the rabbit hole of gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Bree, I'm curious, the Miracle Morning, the Yarrow's Morning, that's 100 days. Could you give me the origins of you starting that group? Because you said it wasn't the first group where you were consistent. So I'd like to hear, obviously you met Bob. So we're talking about mechanics and gratitude again, right? So obviously you met Bobby because of the group that you created. He introduced you to me, but I'm curious the origins of the group and how you became the leader. And he said this group was where you took the oxygen mats off. So he used some powerful words, and I'm very curious about all that.
Well, it's a good question. I have been a behind the scenes, very vocal, individually vocal individual. So if you were to call me and ask me for advice, I got it. If you were to ask me to hop on your team meeting and share that advice, definitely not. If you were to ask me to share that same advice on your podcast, on your stage, on your whatever, absolutely not. So the last 13 years, I have been a behind the scenes individual, communicator, if you will. And I'm going to give you the short version of the story, but it's so good. So I was at the beginning of the pandemic, I was invited to be a senior advisor of a global task force. And as I mentioned, I'm you ask me individually, I got you. Maybe even 2-on-1. Otherwise, nothing. So we have all these meetings, and there's very intense people in it. These people have a laundry list of accomplishments, and myself. And and one day, somebody called me and asked me something point blank. And so I point blank gave him my authentic truth, which was not well received at all. And it turned into an egoic, interesting experience where the character basically tried to bully me and manipulate me and ostracize me and then mute me and was like, no, we're not gonna accept, like, you know, how we can show up as our best selves here. We're going to do all kinds of other things. And it was a fascinating moment for me because I then had to look within myself and ask myself, how can you possibly expect other people to not try and mute you if you mute you? And then I went into my miracle morning practice and I started visualizing, when did that muting begin? And I realized that, I mean, I grew up very, very sick. There's a long backstory within that. But as a result, I never raised my hand ever since the first grade. Like, literally, there was never a classroom and I was like, let me share. There was never any experience that I wanted to insert myself. I never spoke from a stage or from the audience. Like, all of that was just like really an uncomfortable thing for me. And there were tiny little times that maybe I did something and it was like a huge deal, and then I didn't do it again for years. And so this instance provoked within me really identifying, as Michael would say, what were the rocks in my backpack that I needed to unpack. And what I realized is that I was holding on to something that wasn't necessarily serving me or anyone else. And it was the moment in which I laid those rocks to bed and said, I'm not going to allow anyone to mute me, including myself. Yeah. And if there's a space where I can serve not only myself, but those around me at the highest level, I'm going to lean into that with integrity. Because the way to maintain integrity is to commit to what you say you're going to do. And it became just a fascinating unfolding of then Hal asked me to, do some things on Clubhouse and check it out. And I hosted a room, and then I hosted another, and then I hosted another. Who I become today will determine what I am capable of creating tomorrow. Thank you, Bobby. I love that. And after I hosted another and then another and another, and I had some friends along the way that were constantly encouraging me every time I joined some room. They'd say something about me and I'd leave the room, and they were like calling me on stage and they're like texting me like, why'd you leave the room? And I was like, you're talking about me. I was horrified. And so that little evolution of me recognizing, one, it's okay to be comfortable in your own skin. Not only is that okay, but it's encouraged. Not only should I encourage that within myself, I should encourage that within others. And then eventually, 2 months into playing around with this, I'd been on Clubhouse since October. Eventually, I reached out to another co-author and said, hey, do you want to do a room with me for 3 days in a row? We're going to do it Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And he's like, okay, sounds great. So we did that. And then at the end of Wednesday, somebody said, this room is so impactful. This is so great. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. And I was like, what's tomorrow? And then I thought, I should show up tomorrow. And I should show up the next day. Yeah. And then it never stopped. And every single day, the iterations and the evolution of this sacred container has brought so many gifts and gems that I don't even understand, because I'm actually not even included in the majority of what's happening. And that's a beautiful thing to sit back like 30,000 foot view and say, I'm so grateful for me unmuting myself, because as a result, Bobby was able to meet Daniel, and then you three were able to have a podcast. Bobby was able to meet Ron, and you three were able to have a podcast. Like, these are moments that I'm literally not even a part of, but they're the ripple effects of the ripple effects of the ripple effects of me unmuting myself, so that what's meant to happen can unfold in a much more organic and faster manner. So I am incredibly grateful for this individual that I stood in my integrity and called them forth to stand in their integrity. I learned a lot about myself and where I set the bar in terms of integrity. I'm not somebody who wants to just take credit for things I don't do. I'm more of somebody who doesn't even need the credit for the things that I do, but it's all about what is the impact we can make and how much impact can that make. And this individual ended up being one of my biggest teachers, and I'm so incredibly grateful for them, because there's so much to unpack when we're not playing the like, are they right? Am I right? Who's right? What's happening? Did I fail? Did they fail? When we play a different game and the dynamics aren't right or wrong or failure or success, there's so much more learning that's able to happen. And when we look at life through the lens of how might I learn from every experience that I have, even the ones that in the moment might seem very tender, I could have just been like, I opt out. But instead I leaned in, I did some hard work. I unpacked some things that I'd been carrying for a long time. I got to the root of where that was coming from. And then I became a yes person on the ways that I could add value to the lives of many versus a few.
What's your why? What's your why, Bree? Everybody has a why. What's your why?
What's my why on the room? It's my why on the miracle
morning? No. What's your why on your commitment to the miracle morning and to the savers? What's your big why?
Well, people I'm going to take it back a step further. People often ask me, like, what do you do? What's your why? And I always answer with, I just look to do all the good I can in all the ways I can at all the times I can for all the beings I can as often as I can. And the why behind that is really, what is the world that we hope that our grandchildren live in?
That's it.
It's like ask yourselves that question. Like, what if we were to visualize, what is the world that we hope our grandchildren live in? And are we currently creating anything that will, the ripple effects of that impact move something closer to that vision or not?
Yeah.
And so what was that affirmation you put up, Bobby? A moment ago?
Hold on, let me bring him over. Okay, here we go.
Who I become today will determine what I'm capable of creating tomorrow. So when I visualize what is the world that I hope my grandchildren see, and then I ask myself,
I added to that picture too. Can you bring that back up real quick? Yeah. Look at the very bottom right there. What does it say at the bottom?
Brianna, look how cute you are.
Because you're the one, and this is the book that shifted my perspective about what was possible.
Mm-hmm.
This is the book that shifted my perspective about what is possible when we say yes to ourselves first. Because when our cup is full, when your cup is full, then you can pour into other people. That's when you get the opportunity to share. And our why is the exact same why. Everything that I have in the vision about what's important to me is, how can I help? My granddaughter gave me my daughter gave me two beautiful grandchildren. And I want to make sure that they have a world to grow up in that's better than the world we currently have. And the only way that I can assure myself that they have that is by not falling into this idea of, oh, the problems are too big, the challenges are too big, the small contributions that I make, they won't matter. None of it. No, everything matters. All of it matters. And it's the collective, it's the mosaic, if you will, of all of our actions coming together that creates this beautiful picture of possibility for the future for our grandchildren. That's the why. And that why is collectively being crowdsourced every single day in the room that you lead with power, with authenticity, with integrity, with understanding, with compassion, with conviction. And I could go on and on and on. And the reality of the matter is it because you stepped up and said yes to yourself, because you unmuted yourself and made yourself available to let the universe work through you so that the universe could pour into you and fill you up so that you could pour out and fill others up. And this just goes on and on and on and on. And collectively, day by day, one day at a time, we are actively changing the fabric of what's possible on this planet. And this is a global ripple. This isn't just here in the United States. This is a global ripple. A woman spoke from Panama today about,
and Finland.
I'm sorry?
And Finland. And South Arabia.
Yep.
Continue. Woman from Panama.
Yep. Yeah. So Bree, the magic that is coming out of the room because you said yes finally. And it's interesting to know what the tipping point was for you that finally got you to say yes to yourself. Adversity is a wonderful teacher. It's a wonderful teacher. And we have this fear of failure, and I don't even know why, but we do. And I think it's because there's so much stigma around failure. And the reality is that we don't have anything to fear. Oh, here we go. Here comes a wisdom bomb right here. Yeah. There is nothing to fear because, I'm sorry, but my vision is not so great.
Because I cannot fail.
Yes, exactly. That's the bottom line, because I cannot fail. Because I cannot fail. Bree, I just want to thank you. I want to honor you and the way that you show up. If Michael hadn't been so intentional in sharing with, and then of course, Michael did an interview with you. When I witnessed that interview, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's something really magical happening here. And Chris, Bree has a health story behind all of this, that she overcame a story, if you will, that she'd been telling herself her whole life about who she was because of this really true part of who she is as a human being. But when she came to the realization that that's not what defined her, there's a shift that happened inside of her. And then she suddenly became grateful for the teacher that had been, and said, okay, what would happen if I was willing to let go of this story? And what's emerging, it's literally like a butterfly coming out of the chrysalis. This magical butterfly is coming out of the chrysalis. And as the butterfly flaps its wings, the ripples of that are going across the entire planet. People on the other side of the world are feeling the ripple effect, the butterfly effect of Brianna and the work that she's doing in the world. It's magical.
Oh, that was beautiful, Bobby. Thank you. I just to speak to what he just said, and it'd be awesome if we could do a round two and we could dig into that. What he just said obviously was a discussion that needs more time. I would love to, if you're up for sharing that at some point in the future, I'd love to do that. I just wanted to say I love what he said about that, which really resonated with me. Was I had a guy named Teddy on my podcast last year, and he owns a nonprofit called Grateful Peoples, and I have a gratitude journal, and actually is in inner city schools where kids are practicing gratitude and meditation in the morning. So I know it's right in line with what, very similar ideas to what you're putting out in the world. But what he shared with me was so powerful is he had a mother that had MS when he was growing up. Mm-hmm. And back to this whole, and Bobby and I have talked all the time, it's like we label stuff good and bad all the time. And when we do that, just like he was alluding to your story, right? Like you label, I don't know what it was, but you labeled it for whatever reason, because that's yours to label. But what Teddy was said to me, which was so beautiful, he said basically was, I could either be angry at my mom having MS or just love my mother. He's like, my mentality was, I love my mother, I love MS. He's like, he just took away the negative feelings out of it because it's a part of his mom, right? So why, the whole mentality is like, why would I have this bad negative attitude towards what essentially part of my mother? And he said that he shared some really beautiful things. He said, my mom taught me so much. He said, just the fact that I can tie my shoes, I'm grateful. He's like, just the fact that I can bathe myself,
Yeah.
I am grateful. And he meant it. And it all sprung from his mom having MS. And it's, again, right? It's like we get to decide. The beauty is we get to decide what it all matters. We can either say, we can label it negative or positive and decide how we want to go about our day with it. So I love, obviously, that's part, what he just said about your story really resonated with that idea. And I think it's beautiful. And I hope I would love if we could at some point have that discussion. Or I'd love to hear the story at length.
I would be happy to come back on the podcast and on the radio. I don't even know what these things are called anymore. Would be happy to come back in any form and share that story.
Beautiful. Well,
Wow.
Bobby, I mean, I know you got to get off here in a couple minutes, Bree, because you got, do you have any, Bree, if people want to, just before you go, you can express where the best place for people to reach out to you and see what you're doing, just some web links or places for people to hear this.
You can join our clubhouse room every single day at 7 a.m. Central. You can also check out the Miracle Morning Art of Affirmations on Amazon. I've got a website, briannagreenspan.com. And I'm sure that Chris is going to drop the club for the Miracle Morning somewhere, so that
It'll be in the show notes.
Bobby and I and Chris on Clubhouse sometime soon. And until then, keep shining. The world needs your light. All of you guys. This is such a pleasure.
I love it when you say that. Keep shining.
It's actually my favorite sentence. It's
Yeah.
Did you see it's in the book?
There's so many gems in this book. You know what? Before we close real quick, what I want to say is what I love about this book, Bree, what I love about this book is that you use this is kind of like the camouflage, if you will. Do you know how if you want to serve up a message to people that's really powerful, if you can wrap it in
medicine in the cheese.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's why I call it a pretend coloring book.
Yeah, it is a pretend coloring book. It really is.
People don't get it, but it's people are very confused based on who I am and how I show up in the world that I have a coloring book. But then it all kind of makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. Bree, thank you so much listen, the most valuable thing we have is our time. How we choose to share that with other people is what makes all the difference. I want to thank you for choosing to share some of it with Chris and I today. Chris is a gratitude conductor, and you've helped him to be able to create a symphony of beautiful music today with your share. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
From the very bottom.
It's my pleasure. Thank you guys so much for everything you do in the world.
Thank you.
Likewise. Well, I'm Chris with Bobby and Bree, just around here. We got a lot to be grateful for, and we will see you soon. And we are